It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when something unexpected turned my entire day upside down. I was in the living room, half lost in thought and half watching the news on TV, when my stepdaughter walked in. She looked relaxed, dressed in casual home clothes, completely unaware, or so I thought, that I was even there. Then in the middle of the room, she stretched her arms above her head, her back arching slightly as if trying to shake off sleep or stiffness. It was such a normal thing to do, but what caught me off guard wasn't the stretch itself. It was the playful glance she threw over her shoulder, her eyes locking with mine as she softly laughed and said, "Oops, I didn't know you were watching." For a split second, everything felt frozen. The light coming through the window, the quiet hum of the air conditioner, even my own breath. I couldn't tell if she was embarrassed or teasing. Her expression was a strange mix of innocence and something unreadable. And just like that, a wave of questions flooded my mind. Was it just an accident? An awkward moment that sometimes happens in a family? Or was there something else in that look she gave me? Living with a stepdaughter has never been simple. We'd managed to build a polite, sometimes warm relationship over the years, but there were still walls between us, walls built from respect, boundaries, and unspoken rules. She had just turned 21, balancing college and part-time work, and while we shared the same space, our lives rarely overlapped in moments this personal. I always tried to keep my distance, to give her space, partly out of respect and partly because I never wanted to risk any misunderstanding. But now I couldn't help but wonder what she really meant by those words. As she lowered her arms and turned fully toward me, I noticed a flicker of a smile before she quickly looked away. The silence felt heavy, and my heart was beating faster than I wanted to admit. It wasn't just about what had happened. It was the feeling that this moment had opened a door to something neither of us had planned. My mind raced with thoughts about my wife, her mother, who trusted me completely, and the thin line that separated care from confusion, warmth from discomfort. I tried to act normal, forced a small smile, and turned my eyes back to the TV. But the words, "Oops, I didn't know you were watching," echoed in my mind. Was it really nothing? Or had she seen something in my expression that made her curious, even bold enough to test the boundary? The room felt smaller suddenly, and the ordinary afternoon had turned into something charged with tension and questions. As she quietly left the room, I realized this wouldn't be the last time I'd wonder about her intentions, or my own reactions. And so began a story I never thought I'd find myself telling. A story where a single, seemingly harmless moment could change everything. What happened next left me even more puzzled, and maybe even a little afraid of where this unspoken tension might lead us both. After she walked out, I sat there staring at the blank TV screen, barely hearing the noise in the background. I couldn't shake off the uneasy feeling her glance had left behind. It wasn't just the moment itself. It was everything that had led up to it. Living in a blended family had always felt like walking on eggshells. My wife Sarah had worked hard to keep peace and balance, but sometimes small things slipped through the cracks. And now this small moment felt like something much bigger than I could explain. My stepdaughter Mia had moved in with us 3 years ago when she decided to attend a nearby university. First, it felt almost natural. She was polite, a little distant, but we managed fine. Over time, we'd shared small conversations in the kitchen, random chats about her classes, or passing comments about movies on TV. I tried to keep my role simple, supportive but never overstepping. I didn't want to act like her father, because I knew that spot in her heart was already taken by her real dad, even if he lived miles away. My place was more like a quiet guardian on the sidelines. But lately I'd noticed small changes. A few weeks back, I caught her glancing at me during dinner, only to look away quickly when our eyes met. Another time, she laughed a little too softly at a joke I made, something she never did before. I told myself it was nothing, just moments that happen in every household. But now, after today, those memories seemed to carry a different weight. The silence in the house felt louder as I replayed her words over and over. "Oops, I didn't know you were watching." The way she said it sounded playful, almost teasing, but maybe it was just embarrassment covered by a forced laugh. Or maybe I was overthinking everything, reading too much into it because the moment had caught me off guard. Still, the uneasiness lingered. Later that evening, Sarah came home from work, her voice filling the house with a warmth that usually calmed me. We had dinner together, just the three of us, and Mia acted completely normal, chatting about her classes and a project she was struggling to finish. Her voice was light, her smile natural. If there was any awkwardness left from earlier, she hid it well. I found myself wondering if she even remembered what had happened that afternoon, or if it meant anything to her at all. I listened, nodded along, but my thoughts kept drifting back to that moment. Was she testing me, seeing how I'd react? Or was it all innocent, and my own confusion was making it seem bigger than it was? Watching her laugh with Sarah, I felt guilty for even questioning her intentions. But the doubt wouldn't go away. As the night grew quieter and everyone retreated to their rooms, I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about boundaries I never thought would blur. What if this was only the beginning? What if there were more moments like this waiting around the corner? Moments that could pull us into a place none of us should ever go. The thought unsettled me more than I could admit, and I couldn't help but wonder what Mia might do next, or what I would do if it happened again. The next morning I tried to push the memory aside, convincing myself it was nothing. But Mia's presence in the kitchen brought it all flooding back. She stood by the coffee maker scrolling on her phone, her hair slightly messy from sleep. For a second she looked up and caught me watching. There was a flicker of something in her eyes, surprise maybe, or that same unreadable spark from yesterday, but it was gone before I could be sure. She just smiled politely and went back to her screen. I poured myself coffee, my hands a little unsteady. The normal sounds of morning, water running, cupboard doors closing, felt sharper, louder. I wondered if she sensed the tension too, or if it was only in my head. As she turned to leave, she paused and asked if I'd be home later because she might need help with her laptop. It seemed harmless enough, but after what happened, even a simple question felt heavy. Throughout the day, my thoughts kept circling back. I thought about Mia growing up without me around, building her own views about family and men. I wondered what her real father meant to her now, and if his distance had shaped the way she looked at me. Maybe there was curiosity mixed in with the awkwardness, questions about what it meant to have another man in the house. I couldn't be sure if she was trying to get closer in a daughterly way, or if something else was at play. Either way, it left me uneasy. Later in the afternoon, when she brought her laptop to the living room, I noticed she sat a little closer than usual, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something light and sweet. My chest tightened. She explained her problem with the screen flickering, and I focused hard on the laptop, trying to keep my eyes from wandering. But every so often I'd catch her watching me, quickly looking away when our eyes met. It was like a silent game we both didn't want to admit we were playing. While this tension grew between us, another worry began creeping into my mind. What if Sarah noticed? My wife had always been observant, even when she didn't show it. If she sensed anything unusual between me and Mia, even something innocent, it could destroy the trust we had built over years. And worse, it could break our family apart completely. There was also the guilt. I kept asking myself if I was imagining her looks, or if they were real. If they were real, what did that say about me? Was I failing as the adult, the one meant to keep the boundaries firm? The questions felt endless, and each answer only led to more doubt. As days went by, small moments piled up. Mia laughed a little longer at my jokes. She stood a little too close when reaching for something on the shelf. Once, she lightly touched my arm while asking about dinner plans. None of it was clearly wrong, but together, it all felt like we were standing on a line neither of us had drawn but both of us kept brushing against. At night, when the house fell silent, I lay awake, replaying every glance, every word, every fleeting smile. I wondered what Mia really felt, what she really meant. And somewhere deep inside, I feared the moment when this quiet, confusing tension would finally break, and what it might reveal about both of us. One evening, everything seemed normal at first. Sarah had gone out to meet a friend, leaving just me and Mia in the house. The air felt heavy the moment the door closed behind my wife, as if both of us realized at the same time that we were alone. Mia was in the kitchen, humming softly while fixing herself a cup of tea. I tried to keep busy by scrolling through my phone, but every small sound from the kitchen seemed louder than usual, pulling my attention back to her. After a while, she walked over and sat down across from me, her eyes meeting mine with an openness that made it hard to look away. She asked me about my day, her voice soft, almost careful. We spoke in calm, short sentences, but under the words, something restless was stirring. I noticed how she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, how her gaze held mine a bit too long. It was as if we were both silently waiting for the other to say something neither of us dared to say. Then she stood up and walked toward the hallway, pausing to ask if I could help her reach something from the top shelf in her room. My heart thudded at the request, simple, innocent on the surface, but given everything that had happened, it felt charged. I followed her, each step feeling slower and heavier, as though I was being pulled into something I couldn't stop. Inside her room, she pointed to a small box pushed far back on the top shelf. As I reached up, I could sense her close behind me, her breath light against my back. The moment felt stretched, almost unreal, as if time had slowed down just for us. When I finally handed her the box, our hands brushed for a second. It was such a brief touch, but it sent a wave of heat through me that I couldn't hide. She didn't step back. Instead, she stood there holding the box, her eyes locked on mine. The room felt smaller, the silence so deep that even the ticking clock on her desk sounded loud. My mind was racing with questions and warnings, but my body was frozen in that moment. Mia opened her mouth slightly, as if to say something, then closed it again, her expression a mix of hesitation and something dangerously close to curiosity. We stood like that for what felt like forever, neither of us moving, the tension so thick it felt hard to breathe. In the hallway outside, the faint sound of a car passing by reminded me that the world was still moving on, even as we were caught in this quiet storm. Just then, Mia took a slow step closer, her voice low, almost trembling as she whispered my name. The way she said it sent a shiver down my spine. My pulse was pounding in my ears louder than anything else. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the same conflict twisting inside me. In that moment, everything we had been tiptoeing around felt like it was about to spill over. But before either of us could say or do anything more, we heard the front door open. Sarah's voice floated into the house, cheerful and unaware. Mia's eyes widened and she stepped back quickly, the spell broken in an instant. My heart was still racing, my thoughts tangled and frantic, as we both stood there, pretending nothing had happened, while knowing deep down that everything had just changed. Sarah's voice echoing through the hallway felt like a sudden jolt back to reality. Mia and I exchanged a brief look, hers wide-eyed and nervous, mine probably no less shaken. In a heartbeat, she stepped away, clutching the small box to her chest, and I turned toward the doorway, forcing my breath to slow. Sarah appeared in the doorway, smiling as she talked about running into an old friend at the cafe. Her happiness felt painfully normal compared to the storm that had just nearly broken loose between me and Mia. For the rest of the evening, the three of us sat together in the living room, the TV playing quietly while Sarah shared stories and laughed. Mia stayed mostly silent, only nodding along or adding a word here and there. But every so often, I felt her gaze on me, brief but searching, as if she was trying to read my mind, or see if I might break under the weight of what had almost happened. As night settled in and Sarah went upstairs, I stayed behind, staring at the darkened TV screen. That's when Mia returned to the living room, her steps soft and uncertain. For a second it seemed like she might speak, but instead she stood there, watching me with something close to regret. Or was it fear? Before I could ask, she turned and quietly went up to her room, leaving the tension hanging in the air like a held breath. The next morning, something unexpected happened that turned everything upside down again. I woke to find an envelope slipped under the door of my study. Inside was a folded piece of paper with only a few words scribbled in Mia's handwriting. "We need to talk. I can't keep pretending nothing happened." My heart sank as I read the note over and over. The calm, careful balance we'd kept all this time was cracking, and I had no idea what she truly wanted to say. Later that day, while Sarah was out shopping, Mia knocked gently on my study door. She stepped inside, her face pale, her voice almost a whisper as she confessed that what happened wasn't as accidental as it seemed. She admitted she'd felt confused for a while, caught between seeing me as family and being drawn to the quiet way I cared for her. Her words tumbled out in a rush, mixing guilt, curiosity, and something she herself didn't fully understand. I felt my chest tighten with a mix of relief and fear. Relief that I wasn't imagining it, and fear because it confirmed we were on the edge of something dangerous. Before I could reply, Mia paused, her eyes glistening, and told me there was more. She suspected Sarah had begun to notice. She'd overheard her mother on the phone the night before, asking someone if they'd noticed anything strange between them lately. The idea that Sarah might already have doubts made my blood run cold. This revelation twisted everything. Not only were Mia and I trapped in our silent, confusing tension, But now the possibility of Sarah finding out loomed closer than ever. The stakes had changed. It wasn't just about keeping distance or ignoring glances. It had become about protecting the family itself from tearing apart. Mia's eyes searched mine, silently asking what we should do next. I had no answer. My heart pounded in my chest, and the weight of the unspoken words between us felt heavier than ever. And as she stood there waiting, the question hanging in the air wasn't whether this would end badly, but just how soon everything might come crashing down. Mia's confession hung heavy in the room, every second stretching out like an hour. My mind raced, searching for words that wouldn't come. Before I could answer, we heard footsteps on the stairs. Sarah's voice called out, asking if we wanted tea. Mia's eyes widened, panic flickering across her face. I nodded silently for her to go, and she slipped out of the room just as Sarah appeared in the doorway, a curious look in her eyes. Over the next few days, everything felt fragile, as if even the slightest slip could shatter what was left of our family. Mia avoided long conversations, barely meeting my gaze. Sarah, though, seemed quieter too, her questions sharper, her eyes lingering on both of us as if piecing together a puzzle she wasn't ready to see complete. The tension built until one night everything finally came to a head. Sarah asked us to sit in the living room, her tone calm but firm. She looked first at Mia, then at me, and said she couldn't ignore what she'd been sensing any longer. My heart pounded so loudly I thought she could hear it. Before I could speak, Mia broke the silence. Her voice trembled as she admitted she'd felt something confusing toward me. Something she regretted. She confessed to small things. The glances, the way she'd tested boundaries. She stopped short of saying everything, protecting me more than herself. Sarah turned to me, her eyes full of hurt and fear. I confessed too, admitting I'd noticed the signs but had never intended to let it go further. I told her I loved her, that I was terrified of losing what we had. The words felt raw, spilling out faster than I could think. For a moment the room felt frozen. Then Sarah's shoulders dropped and tears filled her eyes. She said she'd suspected something but hadn't wanted to believe it. She thanked Mia for being honest even if it hurt. Then came the unexpected twist that none of us saw coming. Sarah admitted she had been planning to ask Mia's father, her ex-husband, to take her in for a while. Not as punishment, but because she thought space might help Mia clear her feelings. The words stunned both me and Mia. The idea of her leaving felt unreal, but also in some strange way necessary. Mia's face crumpled as she realized her actions had gone further than she intended, and now she might have to step away from the home she knew. In the following days we all tried to heal. Mia agreed to stay with her father for a semester, hoping the distance would help her sort out her feelings. Before she left, she hugged me tightly, whispering that she never meant to hurt anyone. I told her I believed her and wished her strength. Just as it seemed everything was finding a painful but clear path forward, the final twist came. A few nights after Mia had left, I found another note slipped under my study door. This time it wasn't from Mia, it was from Sarah. In the note, she admitted she'd felt something change in her heart too. A quiet doubt she couldn't ignore anymore. She wrote that while she forgave me, she wasn't sure she could forget, and she needed time to think about us. Reading her words, I felt the ground shift once more. The conflict we'd tried to bury had reached further than any of us thought, touching places we hadn't dared to look. And as I folded the note, I realized that sometimes, even when secrets come to light and confessions are made, the story isn't truly over. It just turns into something none of us expected. The days that followed felt strangely quiet, as if the house itself was catching its breath after everything that had happened. Mia had already left to stay with her father, and her absence was felt everywhere. From the empty chair at the dining table to the silence in the hallway where her laughter used to echo. It was a silence that carried both relief and regret, reminding me of how thin the line had been between normal family life and something none of us could truly name. Sarah, after slipping me that note, kept her distance in a way that was gentle but undeniable. We still shared meals, still exchanged small talk about daily life, but underneath it all was a space that words couldn't quite fill. At night, lying side by side, the quiet was deeper. I found myself wanting to say something to bring us back to what we had, but each time, the words felt too fragile to survive the weight of everything we'd been through. One evening she finally spoke. Her voice was calm but tired as she said that trust wasn't something that disappeared overnight, But it also wasn't something that returned easily. She said she loved me, but part of her was still trying to understand how it had all happened right under our roof. I listened, knowing there wasn't anything to defend, only to acknowledge. We agreed to take things slowly to see if time could rebuild what had cracked. As for Mia, she kept in touch through short messages. She told us she was doing okay, that staying with her father gave her space to think clearly. In one message, she apologized again, writing that she never meant to stir so much confusion and pain. She also shared that she'd started therapy, wanting to understand why those feelings had grown in the first place. Reading her words, I felt a strange mix of pride and sadness, knowing she was strong enough to face her own mistakes but wishing it hadn't come to this. Weeks turned into months, and though the house felt emptier, it slowly grew calmer too. Sarah and I began to share longer conversations, sometimes about small things like work or favorite movies, and sometimes about the bigger questions of love and forgiveness. We both learned to be honest in ways we hadn't been before. And while it didn't erase what happened, it helped us see each other as human again, flawed but still trying. Looking back, what started with a single, seemingly harmless moment, Mia stretching in front of me and saying, "Oops, I didn't know you were watching," turned into something that tested all of us more deeply than we could have imagined. It taught me that sometimes the real danger isn't in what actually happens, but in the feelings we keep hidden, the glances we pretend not to notice, and the silence we let grow between us. In the end, the family didn't fall apart completely. Changed painfully but honestly, Mia learned to step away and reflect on her feelings. Sarah and I faced truths we'd avoided for too long. And I understood that being human means being vulnerable to mistakes, but also having the choice to face them with honesty. Though the story had its share of guilt, tension, and fear, what stayed with me most was the quiet hope that even broken trust can be rebuilt, and that sometimes the hardest conversations lead us back to what truly matters: understanding, forgiveness, and love that learns to stand again, even if it wavers along the way.